Hey, deserving listeners, we have a really special guest with us today, Gregg Spiridellis. He reached out to me wanting to talk about a app that he has developed that uses AI that helps clients and therapists. And we talked prior to this recording, and it was an interesting conversation. And I want to get into this. I want to talk about what this app exactly does, but also I want to talk about some of the concerns that I and a lot of people have. So let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Gregg Spiridellis.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Fan of the show.
So for people to give context, Gregg and his brother, I believe you told me, developed JibJab, which is a famous online app service thing. People might associate it with uploading photos, right? And you can have these dance routines, these little GIFs or whatever, flash kind of animation. But also prior to that becoming famous, you were doing online comedy flash videos and whatnot in the early internet age. Tell me about that.
Yeah, actually, I come from a more traditional background. I was doing my MBA at work, and I had been an investment banker for 4 years, was doing my MBA. My brother was out of art school and doing film festivals, and the internet came around. And I remember while I was at business school, I saw a full motion cartoon with sound streaming over a phone line, and it just blew my mind. And I called my brother and I was like, stop looking at television, like, look at this. This is the future. As he always reminds me, I said, don't bang out horseshoes. The Model T's coming off the line. Like, this is where you can actually create something and reach an entire global audience without anybody in between you and that audience. So, I mean, now this is just a fact of life, TikTok and everything else. But back then it was a somewhat, novel idea. So we started a studio called JibJab. Began doing political satires was really the early format. So some folks may remember in 2004, we did a video called This Land Is Your Land. And it was George Bush and John Kerry doing a parody that was probably one of the first global viral video hits. I mean, this thing went everywhere. Peter Jennings named myself and my brother People of the Year for ABC News in 2004. The year before was Larry and Sergey from Google. So I always say we've got 1 year to catch up, but we're working on it. But yeah, we evolved. We love technology. We love storytelling. When Facebook opened up the platform and people could access their photos, we created something called Starring You that enabled you to grab you and your friends and cut their faces out and put them into videos. And, we produced Elf Yourself, which was another big hit. And so we've just always been excited about how technology enables new forms of storytelling. And, we built JibJab for 20 plus years and then started another business called Storybots, which is a kids and family franchise. We actually started on YouTube, created a show that we got onto Netflix, and then Netflix bought the company in 2019. And we were producers at Netflix for the show for 4 years. The show won 11 Emmys, so we're really proud of that. And now we're off on our next adventures, part of which for me is Moments, which is the app we've talked about, and really kind of ties into that thread of how can technology unlock storytelling, because I'm not a therapist. I'm the client of a therapist. And, for me, therapy is a form of storytelling. And I started to dabble and build technologies that help me tell my stories better to make the most out of the time I had with my therapist.
Yeah. So we talked previously about what had inspired you to create this app that is supposed to help clients.
Yeah. So in 2016, I got divorced, and a friend of mine, actually podcaster Tim Ferriss, some folks may know, he was a real advocate for journaling. And so I started journaling for every day. And this is still my practice this morning. Every single day, it is no matter what, I write in my journal when I wake up in the morning. And so I do it in a Google Doc. And so I developed this practice of not only journaling every morning, briefly, it could be 150, 200 words, whatever's on my mind. But after I journal, I'd go back and I would read the prior year's journal entries. So for example, today is October, say it's October 10th, 2025. This morning after I journal, I go back and I read October 10th, 2016, October 10th, 2017. And I found that I started to see the patterns of my life. I started to see the things where I would have negative talk. I started to see where I got overly enthusiastic. I could see, with the benefit of hindsight, all of these patterns. So fast forward or rewind now, but in 2022, when ChatGPT came out, I was seeing a therapist, and I started thinking, I come into my therapy session. Sometimes I don't really know what to talk about. A lot of times I have recency bias, what happened yesterday, and I'd see my therapist every 2 weeks. So one day before I went into therapy, I said, what? I'm going to take my past 2 weeks of journal entries, about 20 pages, put it into ChatGPT, and say, give me a 200-word summary of what's been happening in my life that I can read to my therapist at the beginning of the session and update him on what's happening. And I said, okay, what are the 3 things that have caused me the most stress over the past 2 weeks? And so I walked into the session and I said, hey, do you mind if I read this? Because, I'm experimenting with better, ways we can make better use of the time and get to the kind of the core. And I did. And it was like rocket fuel. It was just this great way, because a lot of times I didn't remember what happened 2 weeks ago. So it was this great spark of discussion. And I found that the 15 minutes or so we would spend at the beginning of the session getting our feet on the ground and getting the kind of the momentum going, that happened in a few minutes. And then all that extra time was kind of available at the end of the session where the good stuff's happening. And so I got really excited about it, and I love building technology. And I'm like, this is literally storytelling. I tell myself a story every day, and now I'm using this tool to kind of help me synthesize this story and tell it to my therapist. And so that sent me on a journey. I started that was in November of 2022. In July of 2023, I started building what's now, our app. And our main app in the App Store now is Moments for Therapists. And that's really a tool for the therapist on the note-taking side.
Is the app available for clients to summarize things yet?
Yeah, the client app is not in the App Store as of today, but it will be back in the App Store in a couple of weeks. We took it out so that we could focus on the core product, which was creating a note taker for therapists. And we're a small team, so we said, we've really got to focus and get this one nailed down, and we're there. So we're actually right now at this very moment, my developer is actually getting the client app ready and back for the App Store.
And what's the client app called?
That one is just called Moments Journal.
Okay, so you have Moments Journal, that's for clients, and you have Moments for Therapists, which is for therapist notes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about Moments Journal. What's the exact function? How does it work?
The idea is simplicity. So I like to write, but writing feels like work to a lot of people. And so if you opened up the Moments Journal app, what you literally see is a giant button. And the idea is that you can voice journal. And so you tap the button and you voice journal. And then we use AI to create a title, a 1-sentence summary. So when you're looking at all your journal entries, you get a quick sense of what it is. And then when you tap into it, we use AI to kind of clean up the grammar, because when you're speaking casually, you don't necessarily, it's not the most readable format. So we'll clean up the grammar and then provide bullet pointed lists as well. So it's a really simple way to journal. And what I love about it when I use it, it's about capturing how you're feeling. The reason the name of the company is Moments, it's how do you feel in the moment? So much fidelity is lost. Even when I journal in the morning about what happened the day before, if you can, if you're feeling something, you're coming home from work, you had a tough day, you can journal literally in your car and kind of capture those feelings and those experiences while they're still with you.
The idea is that it's both helpful as a journal, just independent of being a client, but it can also help in therapy. That's what you found personally in your own work.
Exactly. And so there's also a section of the app. So you have the place where you can capture anything. It's really easy. Open the app, press the button, capture. There's the journal section, my journal section, which has all of your prior journals. And then there's a section called Insights, which you can say summarize what's been happening, and you can select the date range, and you can get that report that I was talking about that I used in my own therapy sessions.
So the Insights, the AI summary or drawing connections, can help people so that they can see themes or insights or questions. I don't know what sort of questions or bullet points it pulls out, but I can imagine, given my experience with other AI bots. And your hope is that for people, they can use this to help them journal in a more efficient way instead of going to Google Docs. And because I've been journaling since I was 13, so I very much know about that feeling of reading old entries and saying, oh my God, I'm still as stupid as I was when I was 15. What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And it helps to know that you're that stupid. And,
Yeah, you can identify the patterns, and like at least when it happens again, you go, yeah, that's me being stupid again.
But when you journal, especially at length over 40 years, then it's hard to quickly draw connections or to ask questions of it. Whereas AI is pretty good at that, or is potentially a tool that can be used. And that can be just independently helpful just as a journaler, but it could also be something you pull up at the beginning of session, or 5 minutes before session, so that as a client you can tell the therapist what you've been up to recently, what's been on your mind, how you've been feeling. Because for yourself and myself as a client, but also as a therapist working with a lot of clients, I can say that there is a percentage of clients that will sit down on the couch. If you have a few kids, you work all day, you had chores, there was a commute, and you sit down on the couch and you're just like, okay, now it's time for me. Because some people, it's like they were fighting traffic and they're worrying about things. They're on the phone when they finally sit down on the couch. And then that's the first moment since the minute they left the last session last week that they are actually thinking about themselves. And they think, okay, where am I? And that's fine. But some people will find that the first 10, 20, 30, maybe 45 minutes of the session are reorienting yourself with yourself, such that, you could kind of see it as wasting time that you could have saved, especially since you're on the clock, you're paying a lot of money for this. If you had just kept a quick, convenient running tally or journal so that you can just pull that up and say, oh, well, and you don't even have to read your journal because the AI has pulled different, bullet points. And you could even ask the AI, what should I tell my therapist? Because that would be kind of a different set of bullet points than just summarizing, like, you went to a movie last week. Like, that's not really relevant. So, I could see that absolutely being helpful. I will say that as an asterisk, that there is something to say for that kind of free associative work. Like if we pull from the journal, then it kind of orients us towards a certain set of topics that might eclipse what might come up for us spontaneously in the moment in session. Having said that, any tool available is going to be a tool that we can evaluate case by case basis for clients. And I would imagine that in general that this would be helpful. But there's the issue of privacy, hallucinations, confidentiality, capitalism, exploitation, hacks. So let's get into that. Let's first talk about privacy, right? Because your idea is that, look, your journal is your deepest, darkest. You don't even tell your therapist or your spouse or anyone this kind of stuff. I mean, not all the time, but that's generally the way it's seen, right?
Yeah.
You are uploading that to this company that has zeros and ones that represent all those thoughts. And we all know that there are companies that will be suspected or have been found to sell that information, use that information. Now, some companies will literally say, like OpenAI, ChatGPT, they'll say, do not tell us your deepest, darkest secrets, because that is, it's not private. We
Yeah.
have,
And it's not privileged. It's not.
we have told you that everything you type into ChatGPT, we can use for something. You know what I mean? So don't tell us that. Now you're asking, please, go for it. So how do you protect privacy?
Okay, so first of all, I have to like say the origin of this company is I could not find a private journaling app in the App Store. Every app that I tried to download, you have to register using a name, an email address, a phone number, something that could be used to identify you as a human being on that server. So the way our client app works is the only way to log into the client app is with an Apple login. And so when a user logs in with an Apple login, we do not, all we get is a long identifier from Apple, a long data string from Apple saying, this user is, 67Q4, and that is all we have on our server to identify the end user. So we don't have name, we don't have email, we don't have phone. We actually block tracking of IP addresses, geolocation, device IDs. The idea is that there is no account system that could ever be tied to you as an individual. Now, clearly, like Apple knows who you are, but they don't have that data. And we don't know who you are, and we have that data. And my mission, why I built this company, is I wanted to create a anonymous private space for people to capture their feelings and experiences, and then to be able to have access to these amazing AI tools in this private kind of sandboxed environment. So that is literally the origin of the company, is around ensuring that the end user's identity does not sit on a server alongside all of these deeply private experiences. On top of that, when you record, when you capture your voice for your entry, that is encrypted on your phone. It's encrypted while it's being sent over the internet, and it's encrypted in our database. So there's no one could look in our database and see people's entries. You actually have to go through what's called an encryption key, which is a whole nother service, and to decrypt it and to be able to look at it. So I am comfortable saying we are architected as the most private note-taking journaling experience in the entire App Store. And I think it also comes from what my goal is. I don't want your email address to market to you. I don't want our business model is literally to provide this very private space for end users, and our business model is is on the subscription side. So that's how we deal with privacy. Is it's architected so that I couldn't. If you said, "Hey, I use your product," I could never look in my database. And first of all, I don't have the encryption keys. It's through a developer protocol that I don't have access to. But even if we could decrypt things, there's no account with your name on it. I couldn't find it, and that's by design.
Yeah. But what if you change your mind in the future? That happens sometimes. And also, what if you sell the company and that person decides to pull back some of that architecture to exploit the data for some other purpose? That happens sometimes. In my world, I'm often talking with couples about trust. And in a sense, you could kind of think about the consumer, us, in a relationship with tech people. And that relationship over the last 20 years has been a problem. We have been exploited repeatedly by companies that claim privacy, or at the very least aren't explicit and aren't clear and upfront about how they are using your private information, not only to market products like on Temu to you, but literally to manipulate the algorithm to drive you down a path of fear and paranoia so that you can use Facebook more often, this sort of thing. And you're a part of that. You didn't do those things, but you're a part of that tech world and that app developer world. And us as consumers have been burned so many fucking times that I wouldn't trust you with that at all. We've chatted. You seem like a nice enough guy. But I'll tell you, even with all that you just told me, if I was to press that button on that app and maybe I'd use it, but I wouldn't give it my deepest, darkest. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it does come down to trust. All I can do is share the story of what we've built, why we've built it, and what our mission is, and why we're doing it. And you and I have talked offline. Like, I've had other successful businesses. I've got another successful business right now. This is my passion business because I believe deeply that there is a need for a tool that enables people to access these really powerful models for the things we talked about, synthesizing what's been happening in your life, playing it back to you, helping you identify patterns. Like, there needs to be a private space where you can use those tools. And it's never going to be perfect. Like, yeah, are we, like all the things you mentioned, are we perfect? No. But are we building the very best solution that can be built to provide a private place for people to access these tools? The most private. And that's our mission. And like, I have zero interest in turning of maximizing profit at the expense of this business, because this is I'm not doing this for that reason. I'm not looking to raise the next round of venture capital. I'm not looking to go public. I'm looking to put something into the world that's good, that's helped me, that I think is going to help a lot of other people. And I think that this is that's why I do it. That's what gets me excited about it. It's not, oh my God, we're going to go get a private jet. No, this is not the business to go get a private jet. There are lots of other businesses to go get private jets. This is not one of them. This is one where you go, at the end of the day, when my productive and creative years are done, if I can look back and go, oh my God, like 10,000 or 100,000 or 1,000,000 people are able to use something I built to better understand the patterns in their lives and live better lives. Like, that's a legacy. That's I love that. That's what motivates me around this business.
Okay. Yeah. But that still can be exploited or hacked or used or misused or something. There's still a connection there. Now, having said that, most people are doing this with apps that aren't even saying that this is private. So there's a lot of users out there that don't care. I'm actually kind of one of them because, I've thought about well, what if this got out there? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'd be a little embarrassed, but it wouldn't destroy my life. I'm not really doing anything that would be that scandalous. So I imagine for a lot of people, it's not that big of a deal. But anyway.
I want to say that's also another thing. Most people are not that sensitive to this, and that's wrong. They should be. Sam Altman, you mentioned OpenAI. Sam Altman is out there saying people are using OpenAI, like ChatGPT, as a therapist. Do not do that. This data is not encrypted. If the police came to us, we would turn over everything. And these are your most intimate moments. I'm not going after the ChatGPT audience, and I'm not going after the 95% of the people who don't care about these things. What I'm saying is, this is not about building the biggest business. This is about building the thing that I want in the world, that my co-founder wants in the world, that thing where you're okay, Yes, this could all, look, the police could go to Apple, get an identification, and come to us with a warrant. Guess what? If there's criminal activity like that, there is that possibility. I will say Apple is about as is the best defender of privacy in the entire tech ecosystem. And they'd have to go to Apple first, get through them, and they'd have to come to us, and they'd have to get through us. And you better believe, like, I would fight tooth and nail to the end of the line, because that's the mission of the company, is to create this private space. So, but at the end of the day, if someone's using this, using services illegally and people get warrants, yeah, there are paths to de-identify. But like you said, this is for the people who care about privacy and anonymity, more than most. But there are those other vectors where identity could, by law, be exposed.
What sort of feedback have you heard about your app? Moments Journal. What's it called? Moments Journal.
It's Moments Journal, but the app that's in the App Store now that we've been focusing on is the therapist product. So Moments for Therapists, and the people who use it love it. Like, we have a few hundred subscribers who don't only use this like a couple of times a week. They use it for like all of their sessions and all of their dictations. We get the best feedback of all is the renewals of the people who are subscribing to our product. And that's, 95% plus every month are coming back and saying this product is delivering the value to me. And they're using it like, 10 to 20 notes a week on average per user.
Well, we have to start from scratch and say what the app does exactly.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry. So when I was showing my therapist what I was doing for myself, he was like, well, is that something that could, help me? Because I literally sit in sessions all day long. And if I could capture them and synthesize these, it would help me keep track of all my clients and everything. And that set us down the path of building Moments for Therapists. And so Moments for Therapists is again, a very simple app. You can create a client list, and we encourage in the app to not identify clients. You could name me GS1. You can name me Apple. You can name me anything. So it's the key thing about the Moments for Therapists app is it's not tied to an EHR. So we see a lot of like EHRs are starting to integrate these tools of like record all of your sessions. And for me as a client, I'm like, wait a minute, like you have literally my name, address, phone number, insurance, like you have my entire most identity in your database. And now you're saying you want to record like my innermost thoughts and put it in a database next to mine. No.
Right. Let me talk about that for a second, because that's important to highlight that for many decades as therapists, especially once we had the standard of practice regarding record keeping, we had different levels of record keeping and different levels of detail. So I'll just give myself as an example that there are a lot of different concerns that I have as a therapist when I am keeping records of clients and individual sessions. There's a minimum level of information that has to be kept track of, like name, address, this kind of stuff. And then each session and treatment plan assessment, there's a minimum amount. Now, I wouldn't necessarily do the minimum because I'm not just trying to do the minimum, but there's a minimum level of information that needs to be in the record for purposes of the standard of care, continuation of services if I was incapacitated or if I died, or if the client wanted to pull their file and look at it, or for myself, just looking back at progress and being able to better treat individual clients, knowing what has happened in the past. But the balance to that is that we don't want to put every detail in the file because clients don't want every detail to be on record that could be pulled by authorities or is passed around or something. And the concern for clients is that, okay, yeah, I was talking about my sexual fantasies And in the record, it would help you as a therapist to have that in there of like, we talked about the client's sexual fantasies, but I don't want you to talk about the granular detail of that sexual fantasy. I didn't think you're going to put that in there. If I go through a divorce or something and this gets pulled, or there's some kind of legal issue that I need to have this pulled, that isn't what I want in there. Insurance companies often have potential access to some part of the file anyway. So then we have, according to HIPAA law, this other form of keeping notes and tracking what's happening in session. We call these psychotherapy notes. And these are notes that are not in the official file. They're kept in a different official file, but they're not a part of the official client file. And in the HIPAA law, it designates how to do this. And we will, as therapists, take our own notes on a client, because if we don't keep track of individual details, then we might forget, or we might not be able to draw connections, this kind of thing. And so we have those other notes, but they're often written in a very personalized form. If someone saw my scribbled notes on my notepad, they wouldn't really know what it was saying. I mean, there would be a couple sentences in there that would be comprehensible, but there's a lot of little symbols and little abbreviations that only I know of. And so there's that. But crucially, if the file was pulled by the client, even, they don't have access to those notes. Now, there's some legal gray zone there that I won't go into, but generally speaking, that's the way that it is. So when we have these online services that are very helpful, that are encrypted and are private, right? For us therapists, that's the general practice, that we have these encrypted services that will keep track of our notes, that help us with billing, And, in recent years, it's become the norm for therapists to use this. I'm old school. I still have a file with a lock on it because I don't know. I don't have that many clients, so it's not hard for me to do that. I'm just used to it. But they've been starting to offer these other functions that are saying, hey, you could just record the sessions. And in the past, that wouldn't have been very useful, because if you record 30 sessions a week, like, it's just taking up hard drive space. You're not going to do anything with it. But with AI, it can summarize it. You can do a search for like a keyword. And as a therapist, this could be very helpful. But that's all in the client record. It's literally like documenting every single word that's happening that the client is telling you, and putting it in the client file. And as I've been saying, the standard of practice, or the typical way that we think about this sort of thing, is that clients don't want every single word in the official file. So what you're saying is that there's this other, what you're offering is this app that isn't a part of that health record system. It's separate. It's akin in the HIPAA language to the psychotherapy notes.
Yeah.
That's not a part of the official file, but it's a tool that therapists can use to keep track and to have a way of having more granular detail. Like when a client tells me about their trauma narrative, that does not go in their client file because it gets very granular.
Yeah.
And they don't want that in the client file.
Yeah.
But I need to keep track of that, because with trauma narratives and treatment and exposure therapy, imaginal exposure, I need to keep track of that so that we can go over that story over and over again. That's, it's a typical exposure therapy style. And so there's a separate file with, a separate app that's separate from these online therapy record app, services. Then, this could solve that. I don't know if I would personally use it, but if I was coming into being a therapist today and there was this service that I wouldn't have to be scribbling around, I wouldn't have to divert my attention from my clients to jot things down, then, I could see that. I could see that being helpful. But so to be specific about moments for therapists, this is something that they do after the session. Is that what you're saying, where they talk
There,
into the app?
yeah, you can. It's up to the therapist. Most of the therapists using the product are doing live session capture. So for example, you could you create your client list. I could be GS1. When I show up, you tap into that client, big capture button, start capturing, put it aside. Obviously, with client consent, everything is client, that all applies. And then at the end of the session, you hit done, and we'll generate a SOAP note or a DAP note, the various format. We have all the main formats. But this is not sitting in the electronic health record next, attached to all the client's private data. And so,
right. So to be specific, you would copy and paste that.
we have a website that you can log into, and it makes it very easy to either edit your notes and right there, and then basically copy whatever you want into the next browser tab, into Simple Practice or whatever your EHR is. So it's just a way to kind of separate, like you're saying, all of that raw data, which, to your point, I mean, all of that transcript data, like the what you could extract from that with AI it's deeply personal. To be sitting there in a database with all of your personal information is pretty scary. Pretty scary.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way that the law works is that whatever is in the official file is in the official file. You can't section things off. Now, maybe these online therapy record services will have a way of sectioning off the granular session data as psychotherapy notes, but it would be easier to trust if there was a completely different company that only had that. Because one of the things that can happen is that you can have your record pulled, and so you give the client record, and if they don't ask for the psychotherapy notes, you don't even have to mention it. Right? They say, give me the client file, and so here you go. And you don't have to say, and by the way, I have this other file, and even if you did that, if they asked for it, generally speaking, with legal advice, you can say, I'm not going to release that anyway.
We destroy the audio files as they're transcribed. So the way our systems work is every 30 seconds, a chunk of the audio from the session is sent to the server encrypted. It's transcribed, and the audio file is deleted, because audio is a biomarker. Voice is a biomarker. So that's just one of the things I want to do when we talk about recordings, and people know that that's like a part of it. For us, is I don't want my voice sitting on a hard drive somewhere, even if it is encrypted. We don't store any of that.
Okay. It's also more data. It makes up more space. But okay, so you have the transcriptions, and if I were to use this app, then I would have a folder that had, if you were the client, GS, meaning that it doesn't have your name associated with it. Then the idea is that if someone were to hack in, well, what's the worry that you would have?
Yeah. Oh, on our side, or
well, you're marketing it and trying to have it so that it is not
detached from the medical record.
Well, but it's also, even if someone saw it, they wouldn't know who they were exactly referring to, right? So the worry wouldn't be internal, right? Because your practice and the architecture is such that, I'm guessing similar to the other Moments app that we talked earlier, that your employees or other people.
Oh yeah, same systems. No, everything's encrypted. I couldn't look in a database and see any data, by design. We have a system that actually keeps a log of keys that decrypt the data. So if I look at our admin control, I don't see any. I can't see client. I can't even see GS1 in our systems. Every little bit of data is encrypted. So that's the idea, and it's also the idea to not say when you go to add a client on our screen, it's one formed field. It's not first name, last name, birth date. It's one field, and we say create anonymous a client. We encourage you to not use names and to use some sort of other way of identifying who this client is. So we like try to push that through the whole experience. So even though it is encrypted, if you could somehow decrypt it, it would, I could be called Pumpkin. It's like it doesn't,
But if you had a number of even just one session, there could be enough information if someone got their hands on it that they could identify the person, right? If they talked about their job, or they talked about a certain person's name, or they said something about what they were doing in life, it wouldn't be hard, especially for AI that was sort of scrolling through it. They can figure out. I mean, Google can figure out who I am, even if I'm using a computer that isn't mine.
Yeah.
It can just tell based on certain, even if I'm not logging into anything, you can just be like, oh, it's that guy, because of preferences, or even just the way I'm moving my mouse, or how fast I'm scrolling through an app. Like it has ways of identifying the individual. And so it wouldn't be hard to look at it, if people did get their hands on it. But I suppose that's true if someone was to hack into a health record online system as well, right?
I think the thing is, if you could get through the decryption and all the other security safeguards in a system where your identity also existed, it would be easy. But our system is designed so that everything, you'd have to decrypt everything one at a time and try to tie together all of these things and infer who the person behind these multiple sessions is. So again, it's like, it's I think there are no absolutes in security, but I think we have the best architected solution to kind of take advantage of these tools, and then it becomes a risk and benefits type of decision for the individuals. And I will say also, I have a lot, like one of my oldest clients on the app, he's become a friend. And I know him, so he's like become a personal friend. He's actually in Boulder, where I am, and he uses the tool to synthesize the sessions. He gets his notes, he puts what he wants into his EHR, and he deletes the note. So so he's on the end of the spectrum of, I know you, Greg. I trust you. I don't trust systems, so I'm going to delete every record. So it can be used as kind of a processing tool as well. But I really think the real long-term value is to be able to look at sessions longitudinally and extract insights that help you do a better job as a therapist, identifying patterns and helping clients. But there is that, people fall on that risk opportunity spectrum, different places.
Yeah. So the initial worry about all of these kinds of things using online record keeping was initially therapists were very hesitant to use it. But then when experts started to talk about this, they said, well, someone can break into your office and take all your files. So it's not like your files were ever super secure, and your daughter can wander into your office probably and get a hold of your keys and take your stuff. So it's not like your records were super secure before. And, that doesn't mean that all bets are off, but there's a possibility that if you have good password control for yourself as a therapist with these online services, that it's way more secure than if you had a file cabinet in your office. So there's, like you said, risk versus benefit. I'll just say for myself as a therapist and as a supervisor, if I can know that the information is private and that the therapist has control over like deletion and doing it in their own comfort level, because basically what you're saying is your friend is like, look, I trust you, Greg, and yet I'm still not going to just leave this data up on these servers. I'm deleting it even though I trust you.
Yeah.
But if we can trust these services, which, given certain reassurances, I could see a lot of therapists doing. I mean, clearly a lot of therapists are doing it already, not only with yours, but with other online services. But yeah, absolutely. There's risks, and there has to be training, and there has to be understanding of therapists on how to use this, because there are hallucinations there, and large language models uh, tend to summarize in a particular way. It's not purely objective, if that makes sense. And so there are cautions, but yeah, it could be extremely useful for therapists to be able to. Yes, I don't have this problem anymore because I have very few clients. But when I had a full load, especially when I was working at agency, because they really push you to the limit when you're working at an agency, to have like 35 sessions in a week, and 10 of them are brand new clients that you've only been working with 1 to 5 weeks. And I would have clients come into my office because, I'm frazzled. I only had 2 minutes to go to the bathroom, and I sit down, and the receptionist sends in the new client, and I'm looking at the client and I'm like, I know I've talked to you before, but I don't remember anything. I don't even remember your name. You know what I mean? And so to have a tool that I can say while I'm in the bathroom, and I pull up an app, and I'm just like, okay, next client, give me 3 bullet points of what they talked about in the last session or in the previous, and it can summarize that for me. I mean, not
That's
only just would it save my ass, but it would enhance treatment for sure.
Yeah, that's a feature actually. In our app, we have it's called recaps. And so if you go into the client, they're basically flashcards. And so we'll take your hour-long session and we'll extract, I think it's 10, up to 10 of the key moments in the session, and we put them into flip cards. So you can basically TikTok your way to kind of recalibrate, because the people using our tools are the people in those situations. They're not the folks who have 5 clients and it's like they've got, these are folks who are working with a lot of people and trying to, like, the documentation backs up. So like the big thing for us is people come to us. Why do they come to us? Documentation, the backlog and the bringing it home and the weekends, and it's that. So we call that the painkiller. Like we can do your first draft of your notes, like, and then you can do what you want with them. But the vitamin, the thing that we think, like, people go, oh wow, this makes me better, is in those 3 minutes when you're going to the bathroom and you're flipping through the cards. You're like, oh yeah, his sister did this, and he had this event coming up, and then the client sits down and you say, oh, how did how was the kids' music recital with your ex there? And so all of a sudden the client's like, he remembers me. Like, yeah. He remembers.
Well, and that for sure, but also, oh yeah, we talked last time, or maybe even I could see the app helping to identify things that you might have been neglecting. I don't know if you do this, but say the model is such that it will either flag, or you can ask it, what's something that we got into that was kind of juicy that we haven't talked about again, because every session's recorded. And it can say, well, there was this one thing 7 sessions ago where you talked about how her dad had this way of parenting her, and there's a possibility of it having, when I think about this, it's like if it was trained on theory even, which I'm guessing it's not, but in the future it could be, that it could be able to identify certain theoretical angles. Like, that kind of sounds like projective identification, and it could tell me that, and then I would be like, oh yeah. And then because there's so many times when I will in session be the way that my practice is that if there's something like that happens, like, ooh, wow, that's something that just happened, or I just noticed something that we should definitely be revisiting as we move forward. And I also know that if I don't jot this down, I might forget it. So I will jot it down in my notes. I have a legal pad that is there for me with every client. There's a certain scribbled page, but I might not recognize. Sometimes I jot things down. I don't even know what I meant by it,
I love that. That might be a new feature. Like honestly, like because I said live sessions, but a lot of our subscribers will use the product for dictation post session. So they don't want to get consent and they don't feel comfortable capturing the session, but they can do like a voice dictation, a 2-minute voice dictation. But I could see a feature where you could say where there'd be a follow up section. You could just say, hey, remember to follow up on this. And then in those 3 minutes before the person walks in the next week, you could actually flip through those as well. So.
Right. Yeah, I could see that being extremely helpful. And if there are clients out there that have had this experience, you know what it's like when you can kind of tell that your therapist forgot what you said.
100%. Yeah. And if they're seeing 30 people a week, let's have some empathy for the therapist. Like this
Totally. But it feels shitty, and it calls into question the whole thing. It's like, oh, well, what else have you forgotten? And are you keeping track of anything? Do you care? You know what I mean? So this could really help that a lot. Yeah.
This is what excites me about the tool. It's not hey, we can do your soap notes faster. That's great. I mean, there are the folks who see a lot of clients. This is the number one cause of burnout is like documentation. So that we can help with that is great. But what excites me are things like, hey, can we get that therapist prepared in 30 seconds with a couple of card flips? So when that client walks in the room, they feel seen in a way that the therapist wasn't able to do in the past because it wasn't possible to kind of access those quick bites and show up that way. But also ultimately, the bigger vision is how do we take what happened in the session and give the therapist a tool to push exercises, journaling prompts, things that are related to the session out to the client so that they can continue the work in between sessions. Like that's the big vision. That's where I'd really love to see our product go, is that closed loop to say like, okay, like you walked in, I remembered these things because this tool helped me remember them. We had a great session. And after the session, I was able to like with a couple of taps, send you a couple of relevant exercises that you get to do during the week and bring back to the next session. So I love that. That's what excites me when I think about the product building and the opportunity. It's really like closing the loop between sessions for both the therapist and the client.
Yeah, I could see it being really powerful. The journaling, if the client wanted to, could be summarized quickly so that the therapist can either review that in the minute before the client arrives or in the first 5 minutes of the session and pull it up, and they, client and therapist can look at, okay, here are the themes that the AI, and maybe even it pulls quotes, right? Like here's where they were talking about that. Yeah. But what was the LLM trained on exactly?
We use OpenAI. So we use their APIs with what's called a zero endpoint, so that there's no training, no storage, no anything. It's just it's a transaction. But the real art in this is in the prompt writing. So working with therapists and how it processes the transcript is where the real art comes in. And so basically the prompts are very specific about what information it's looking for and how it's going to categorize it and summarize it. And the way our prompts are written are they're very specifically designed to ground it even more than the models, because you mentioned hallucinations and that's a problem, and it's become much less of a problem as the models get better. But the way we do it is we literally break up the words that were spoken into subjective, objective, assessments, and then we do simple grammatical changes. So there's an art to prompt writing, and I think like ours, they work really well. People really love the output, and they don't, knock wood, we haven't had any inbound customer supports about hallucinations.
I could see a lot of uses. I could see it helping with diagnosis. There's been research regarding using it in the medical field. I don't know of any in the psychotherapeutic field, but I imagine that there is research going on that could help. Now, do we want a robot diagnosing? No, but it's a tool that therapists can use to help, and just the overall, especially with certain diagnoses that are more complicated, like personality disorders. I don't know how good OpenAI would be with that, but if, again, you have therapists that are trained to know the certain prompts, know how to use it in a way that is responsible and ethical, I could see it helping, because with diagnosing more complicated diagnoses, it's too much to ask therapists to be experts on the entire DSM. I am an expert on a majority of it, but I am a professor, I'm a podcaster, I'm dedicated, I'm old, I've been a therapist for 30 years. So it's, I have that. But, most therapists, they go to work, they go to graduate school, they go to work, and they have kids and they have chores and they have lives, and they don't have time to, constantly learn and go deeper. And so AI, this tool that you wouldn't use to diagnose, but you would use it to help a little bit, to give you information, and that it could potentially catch details that slipped your mind or that you forgot, right? It could, maybe because it has that entire, if it is recording all the sessions. I say all this again with the caution of capitalistic exploitation, hacking, all sorts of things. If we, so everything depends on that security, which is something that, you're definitely trying to establish, and I guess have established, but we just can't really know moving into the future. But if we can really be assured of that and count on that, then I could see this helping. Again, there's hallucinations. I find ChatGPT. I've used the 5th iteration, and on some things it's pretty good, but with other things it just makes shit up, especially when it comes to research, and it'll look real good. It'll even have like a link. It'll say, "Here's this study. This just happened to me yesterday." And I'm just like, it just makes it so I don't trust anything it says. But if I use it as a tool that I don't take as true, what I'm like, okay, well, some of that might be true, and then I just do my own legwork. But so it's kind of like a weird Google in a sense. So now what you're asking OpenAI to do is not that sort of thing. It's just pulling from the transcripts, which in my experience is less likely to create hallucinations, because it's pulling directly from a small set of data, right? It's not.
It's synthesizing what's there as opposed to creating material based on a prompt. But even then, it's like how you ask it. So we've got like very specific steps. First do this, second do that. And then, you go through these steps. At the very end, we have a process that goes, okay, here's your note. Now go back to this thing and look for inconsistencies. If there are any, make a change, do it again. So yeah, the prompt writing piece is the art, to this. And like I said, we feel we've had really good, people love our output. Like that's how you can tell. You can go, and there are dozens of services that will do kind of the note-taking piece. I think where we excel is kind of on the user experience side. I'm from a consumer app background, so it doesn't feel like medical software when you're using our stuff. But I think the real value is what comes out and the quality of the notes and how grounded they are. And I think people tell us that we stack up at the top there.
Okay. Yeah, I suppose the last little concern that I would have for this app or any other app that does this sort of thing is that when you transcribe conversations of any sort, particularly therapeutic conversations, you lose 90% of what's being communicated. You lose the emotional content, you lose the emphasis, you lose the facial expression, the body language, and you can't really know from a transcript what really happened in session. But, that's why human therapists are still needed. And
I really think it's good that you said before, like, This is a tool for the therapists. This is not a like, here's the output, put it in the record, move on. Like, our job is to make the therapist's job easier, and they're like our checkpoints at each like along the way, and it's the therapist's job to look at it and to add those details. I always say like the most powerful moments in my therapy sessions are the ones where like my therapist says nothing and makes me sit in silence for an excruciating long period of time to sit with whatever stupid thing I just said, like, and those things don't get captured in transcript. And I think that to us is key. It's like, look, and also we haven't even talked about like therapy bots and these sorts of things, but there is no part of our vision that is ever anything that removes humans from the providing of these sorts of services, because there's too much in the nuance, and there's too many potentially bad things that can happen and are happening with these therapy bots. And you have states that are like banning these client facing therapy bots entirely. So we're again, how do we help solve pain points for therapists, and how do we give them tools like the recap cards that help them do their jobs better? But that's an important part of kind of our product philosophy is we're helping the therapists. We're not like looking to kind of take all of the work away from them. They've got to touch this stuff at some point.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say, it just occurred to me that there's a parallel experience I have in my personal life where there are certain details that my friends will tell me in conversation that for whatever reason I forget pretty easily, and they're pretty big details, you know, like their mom died or something. I know that sounds really horrible, but unless I was kind of there when they were going through the grief, or if it was something we talked about for a while, which might not have been the case, then sometimes I'll forget these really important details. And so, I mean, usually it's not something like that. Usually it's something like, I have a friend who, this is just hypothetical, has pretty intense joint pain recently or something. And they're not super talkative about it, but I care. And when I see them next, I would like to remember that so I can just ask them about it, or just know that they're silently suffering in that way. And it just occurred to me that for myself, if of course they consented to recording the conversations, plus it would be kind of this interesting little journal of both of your lives and your friendship. You could ask the AI, how close are we? Or have we ever talked? Because, the other part of this that now all these like uses are coming to mind about, I guess moments for friends or something. And I am frequently driving home thinking, Kirk, you probably just said the same story to that person that you say every time you see them, because there's certain topics that come up, and then I'll think, wait, did I tell that person that story 10 other times? And I loathe the possibility that someone says, well, here he goes, he's telling me that stupid ass story again, and now it's a little different. So is he lying or something? And so if I had a AI, I'd be like, dude, am I moments for friends? Am I saying the same stories to the same person? Actually, yeah, you've said the story 3 times, and it's been a little different. And then the next time I'm gonna hang out with that friend, I'll be okay. What stories have I already blathed into their ears that I should avoid? And it will tell me, and it'll say, also 3 times ago they mentioned they had joint pain. You haven't asked them about. Oh yeah, thanks. Like I know that sounds really dumb because it's just like, oh, an app to help me be a better friend, but I personally would find that to be useful.
It's not, yeah, no, it's not dumb. I mean, there are some companies out there now that are going to the extremes. They're creating these pins that literally capture your entire day, and they're just like live streaming all your conversations. And I mean, yeah, these tools are getting integrated like in really, like, the world is changing very quickly, and honestly people's comfort with these tools, is progressing or devolving. I don't know, depending on your perspective, but like, look, I make an app that's a note taker, and nothing makes me more aggravated than when I get onto a Zoom and someone thinks it's just okay to have a note taker already there recording what I'm saying without my permission. Like, so I think there's social norms and etiquettes that are starting to form, and so I'm not going to be the guy wearing the pin to record everything, because like, I started this company because I like my private space for that, but I do, and I get annoyed when note takers show up on Zooms and no one says, "Hey, is it okay if I take note? Like, if I bring my note taker on?" Like, that makes me crazy. So, but on the other hand, to your point, like, I use my app all the time to like capture things. Like, I'll have like, I have a friend going through a rough divorce, and I'll do a little, after I talk to him, I'll say, "Hey, Joe's going through this, and here's what's going on." And, and I'll set a reminder to check in with them in a week. And you know what I mean? It's just, so I use it for little things that can be helpful to me, that make it really easy to capture and like move on.
All right. Well, Gregg, thanks for coming on the podcast. And I want to remind all the listeners out there to please take care of yourself. Gregg, why should people take care of themselves?
Oh, I mean, because you only have one self. I mean, honestly, you have to, it's, if you don't do it, nobody else will.